right, ready? Okay. His name is wonderful. His name is wonderful. His name is wonderful. Jesus, my Lord. He is the mighty King. Master of everything. His name is wonderful. Jesus, my Lord. He is the great shepherd, the rock of all ages, Almighty God is He. Bow down before Him, love and adore Him. His name is wonderful, Jesus, my Lord. All right, number.
This is a real short one.
Yeah.
I
am the resurrection.
Sorry.
And the life. He will be there. He'll never come. Sorry about that. I love you, Lord, and I live my voice to worship you. Oh, my soul, rejoice in all my King. Give what you give. Let it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. Let's have a second time.
love you, Lord, and I breathe the whole.
Come back.
Second time, dear.
Go back up. I love you.
Okay, it's kind of difficult to do three things.
There we go.
I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you, oh my soul, rejoice, great joy, my King, in what you give. Let it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. Number 19. 19. Mike is favorite. Forever in the morning, forever in the evening, always His man. I will not danger, I will not glory, I will not love His wings, run and His church, all over the land. I believe it's going to be better and better by the time.
Did you pass out
What?
The lesson.
Questions?
the questions?
No.
Is it too soon to get a bus?
All right. No, where is it? Did you explain everything
I
already?
just said you were going to give us a quiz.
Okay. All right. First of all, I want to say that I did pray and ask God about should we or we shouldn't do that, and I have a strong feeling that we should, to try. So here is what we want to try something new. I know that some of us are struggling remembering things, summarizing the material. You know, we sometimes have questions and Tim doesn't necessarily have the time to answer sometimes. So I came up with a few questions which were very interesting for myself to study. And here's what we want to try. Since we always, we never have enough time, so I want to ask you to answer very briefly. Okay? And I try to make questions the way you could answer briefly and shortly. Like, it's a very specific question about very specific thing. The purpose of the entire thing is to help people like myself to remember and to summarize the material, and therefore to learn more about God. Make sense? Want to try? Yes, no, yes, yeah. Good.
I love it.
Now, I already have answers for all questions, but I'm not giving you answers right now, but I will give it later to all of you. So you could, but next time, you see, I still don't know how it's going to work. Next time probably I'll hand out questions before. All the questions are based on his teaching, on his outline, previous lesson outline. Okay?
Yeah. So if you didn't bring last week's outline,
No,
you've got a limitation right now.
Huh?
Yes. If you got the outline of this.
Yes. And you're allowed to have, again, his last week's outline in hand. So if you don't bring it this time, it's okay. This is just the first trial to kind of get the idea of what it's going to look like. Okay?
If you don't have it, you're going to want to.
Yeah. Unless you're a genius and you remember everything. Okay. So if you have it, you're welcome to look at the outline. And you don't look at mine. Yeah. All right. So first question, Michael, to you.
Come on, Michael. Wait till you get to Norman.
Okay, I need Michael.
Always in the room. She calls on
Michael, focus on me.
Yes.
Okay, short question, short answer. What's the significance of the book of Joshua? Why we should learn it?
Well, the only thing I really know about the book of Joshua is the fact that he and his mighty band strode around the city of whatever who it was, and the walls fell down.
Mm-hmm. That's the part of the story. So why we should learn about Joshua, you think? Okay, Landry.
I think I flunked.
Yeah.
How do you say in English? Non-satisfactory?
Yeah.
How do you say that?
No, yeah, that's right.
Okay. Who knows the answer?
Now, what was the question again?
Why we should learn this book,
Because it shows God's grace.
right?
It's a historical book of
It's a
numbers.
historical book, and it fulfills the prophecy about Israel conquering the land.
Right.
Люда Юра, понятно? Нужно учить книгу эту, потому что в ней осуществляется пророчество о завладении Израилем обетованной земли в историческом контексте. Okay. Question 2. What does the name Joshua mean? Who knows? Janice?
Yeah.
Messiah? Jesus.
What does it mean? Let's say I hear it the first time. What does it mean? Joshua. Yeshua in Hebrew.
Savior. Salvation.
Salvation.
And more specific? God is salvation.
Right.
Now, regarding to this, I prepared a material to you. And that is a linguist died in me.
Yeah.
It's about the name of Joshua, okay, Yeshua, where it came from, the origin in Hebrew, and I'm going to hand this all to you, okay? So it means God is salvation. All right. Where and how is he mentioned, Joshua, is mentioned the first time in Bible? Who remembers?
Oh.
Exodus
17.
You don't?
17,
Great.
18.
So what's the story, Luda? You can say in Russian.
It's first mentioned
Uh-huh.
already as the general.
Right.
Very good.
Israel army.
Uh-huh.
Very
So
good.
it was what? The first battle
Battle, yeah.
of Israel with the enemies after escape from Egypt. The first battle. Okay.
Who were the enemies called?
Who were the enemies in that battle?
Amorite.
No. Amalekites. Very good, Kathy. Amalekites.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Who were Amalekites? Who they were? What we know about it?
Where'd they come from?
Seems like Russian party is winning here.
And Nephilim.
Who'd they come from? Who are they descendants of? Very good.
Very good, Sam. So they were
Very good.
Esau's grandson. Yes.
Family.
Family. Okay. And they, Amalekites, as well as other hostile tribes Amalekites were traditional enemies of Israel. Because why? Because Esau was
Brother of
Jacob.
And God favored Jacob, not Esau.
That's right. All right. Next one. This is a difficult one. Only for smart people. So in Exodus 17:16 we read, "For the hand of Amalek is against the throne of the Lord." Tim talked a lot about that last time. The English part, the English piece of the name is missing in English Bible.
There's two words in the Hebrew that the English does not translate for whatever reason.
Okay.
When you go back to the original, that's what it says.
So what does it mean? Okay. For the hand of Amalek, is that how you pronounce it? Amalek?
No, Amalek.
Amalek. For the hand of Amalek is against the throne of the Lord. What does that mean? So Amalekites were who? The enemies of
And
people.
add one more. Can I add one more verse to it? Might help.
Mm-hmm.
The next verse says, "And there shall be war between Amalek and my people from generation to generation." How could you have war against Amalek? Go ahead. Keep going.
I don't know what else I want to say with that.
So
But
what
yes,
does it
is.
tell you about the nature of the battle?
It's from Satan.
Yeah, they weren't very,
It's a spiritual war.
It's a spiritual war.
From the chair, the metal chair. Yes. So, do you want the answer to that?
I got it. Pam got it.
Okay, but I didn't hear the answer.
Spiritual war.
Okay. I struggle with. I fight Satan and demons every day. That's also a spiritual war. What's the difference?
You mean what's the difference between a physical war and a spiritual war?
No, what's the difference between my war and that war?
There is something different.
About what we call the law of first mention. What the law of first mention means.
It's important.
That the first time something is mentioned, it's significant and it's a prototype for other things to follow.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So here they come out of Egypt, and what happens? First thing,
They were in battle.
They're in a battle.
Battle ever since.
correct.
Mm-hmm. And it's the difference between your spiritual battle and their spiritual battle is
I'm always the winner.
Oh, good.
they were God's people. We are not God's people. The spiritual battles can be equal, except Satan wants to annihilate God's people. Is that what you're looking for?
No. Let me tell you this. For the hand of Amalek is against the throne of the Lord. So what is really the hand of Amalek against the throne? Or whose hand was it? Satan's hand was against the throne. So the first battle sets the pattern for all future battles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, since now we're going to fight, and there is not just a war between two tribes, it's a war between God's people and their enemies.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, next one. What lesson did Joshua learn from the first battle? From that first battle, what did he learn?
Obedience to God.
Keep your way.
What did he learn from the first battle? God had promised him, I will be with you.
Mm-hmm.
Be strong, be courageous.
Mm-hmm.
I will be with you. And he learned that as long as he was looking to the Lord, he won battles.
That's right. So Joshua learns that all future battles are really the battles happening also in spiritual realm.
Mm-hmm.
And from now on, God is leading all those battles, and many battles will be won by a supernatural way,
Right.
as the first one was.
Was that the one where he had to raise his hands?
Exactly.
And his hands got tired, so he had to have...
As soon
Well,
as
with Moses' hand.
Yeah, when he put him down and they were
Yes.
losing.
Moses was on the hill with the other guys, and Amalek was, Joshua was leading the battle. Okay. Why did Moses change his name from Hosea to Yeshua?
Why did he change his name?
Mm-hmm.
Because Joshua means God's with us. God is my salvation.
Mm-hmm. Because Hosea meant what?
Salvation.
Salvation. And Yeshua means
God is my
God is
salvation.
my salvation. Very good. Okay. Joshua is a clear prototype of Messiah.
Mhm.
How do we know that? Why? It's a simple one. Sam, what do you think?
I'm not sure what you're looking for. I mean, I remember talking about it.
Dan? Okay.
Repeat. So,
Okay. Joshua is a clear prototype of Messiah. Why? How do we know that?
Savior of his people.
Are there any parallels in their lives, ministries? Or you don't
So he
see it?
got salvation, I mean, through the battles after, and they conquered Canaan.
Let me give you a little hint.
Yeah.
If you would have an outline today from the last week, there is an answer right there. There's many others.
Salvation.
Okay. And Tim said there, just as Christ is the spiritual entity who guides them through, Joshua is the human entity and leader of Israel. Okay? Okay. I guess I'm going to skip this one. You remember the example of, give me a few examples of meal in God's presence.
What?
Meal, eating, food.
Oh,
in God's
food.
presence.
Example of eating food in God's presence. Very separate.
Abraham.
Abraham
Very
with
good. With the
The
food.
that
the-
came to talk to me.
with the angels and the
Yeah.
Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Genesis 18. That's one of the first ones we read about.
Mhm.
And
Last Supper.
Oh, well, that's going into the New
yes,
Testament.
Oh, I didn't specify.
Well, I was going to say Mary's Supper of the Lamb, but that's New Testament.
well, the Ten Commandments are going to be
Do you
given.
remember example? Мила?
Я немножко понимаю, что говорят.
Когда люди ели в присутствии Божьем. Были такие примеры из Библии?
Ангелы ели в присутствии. Подожди.
Какие были случаи, когда люди ели в присутствии Божьем?
И ели и пили пред ним написано в одном месте. Вот. И не умерли написано.
Очень много мест. на самом деле. Окей, я это раздам потом. Хорошо. Okay, what was the tent of meeting? What was that?
Where?
God's tonight, Shekinah glory filled the tent.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the
Spirit
tent?
of God.
Well, the tent of meeting was where Moses went out from the camp and met with God.
Yep.
And
But
then
what if-
later was the tabernacle.
What was even more important, I think, is that everyone who sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who was seeking God could go to that tent,
And who didn't want?
specific place.
And who didn't want to leave it? The text says Joshua.
Joshua was the guy who was constantly there serving God.
I have a question. Did they go in the tent or did just Moses go in the tent?
I
And
think,
they were outside the tent.
I think only Moses went in because it says in the text that when he would go to the tent, they would come out of their tents to watch what
What
happened.
happened? Right. That's what I thought.
All right. What lesson did Joshua learn from the experience of spying in Canaan? Mike, do you remember what they did? That Moses sent 12 guys to the land. Remember?
Okay.
No? Okay.
The majority
John?
are never right.
I'm sorry, Jack?
Okay, the majority is not always right.
Yeah, that was his point. Yes.
Yeah, you can't.
It's not always right.
Not always right.
It is not necessarily wrong, always,
Well,
but
they could be wrong.
yeah, but it's not always right. Yes, and God is the only one to trust beyond appearance, because they saw giants there. They saw big cities with big walls. And most, yes, and most of them were scared. They said, well, no, we're not going there because we're going to be killed. And only two guys, Joshua and Caleb, agrees that,
God was able.
yes, God was able. All right. 3 left. How was Joshua commissioned as the successor of Moses? How did that happen?
He was commissioned by the Lord. Moses did the commissioning, but God told him to.
Okay, let me help you with this one because you might not remember. So at the moment when God says to Moses, because of your rebel, you're not going to see the land. Look at this land. Okay, you're not going to enter the land. You will never enter the land. Then Moses says, then God, please appoint a man who would lead people. Okay, and then God says, literally, he says, here is a man in whom is the Spirit. Appointed Joshua. This is how Joshua became the successor. Well, I'm not even saying about all the preparation he went through before he was appointed. And the last one. I'm sorry, 2 more. How did Joshua learn about the importance of the written law? This is a very important.
I want to talk about that
Well,
tonight.
Moses originally told him to start writing stuff down, correct? And then after that, he was to follow the law and have the people follow the law.
And there is a place also mentioned in his outline there, Deuteronomy 31, 23, 26, which explains why it is important.
Well, it's put in the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay. The last one. When did Joshua learn about spiritual leadership and what did he learn?
There was an event. He learned something very important.
There were 70 elders that the Spirit of God came upon.
Yep.
And they prophesied.
Yep. Except?
For the 2 left in the
There you go. 2 left in the camp. And then they also,
Prophesied.
He got upset
Yes.
about it.
yes, he got upset. Why?
He thought they didn't deserve it, so it wasn't up to him.
Right.
Right. He thought that it wasn't authorized by Moses. So he complained to Moses. And Moses' response was, I wish that everyone could prophesy.
Yeah.
Why are you worried about where they are? You know?
So Joshua learns again from the outline that true spiritual leadership is not about how people obey him as leader. It's about what God has planned, and that may violate his concept of God's will. So my will and God's will, they could be and very often are very different. All right? Okay. Now, let me hand you this, and then Dr. Kennedy will start with his new. This is about the name. All right. Down there, good. My brother. There's some Hebrew to look at.
Thank you.
Dr. Kennedy, do you need one?
No, not right now.
That E and the short answers.
Oh, questions?
I didn't get the answer
Yeah.
for the quiz.
That's to give you the idea. And I'm telling you, I was so much not to do it tonight.
Thank you.
But
Thank you. How long did it take you to
Any-
put this together?
1 week. Reviews and feedbacks are highly appreciated, especially positive ones.
Can I do I have to?
She's honest.
Esau and Jacob were enemies like Ishmael and Isaac.
Yes.
Like Ishmael and who?
Isaac.
Oh, yeah.
One more thing I want to say. Who I am even to do this. And I really didn't want to do this. I asked him to do questions and he asked me to do that. And I don't feel confident at all doing this. So if it's not going to work for you guys, I am kind of ready for that. But I hope it will be helpful because it does help a lot myself.
To review.
You too.
Yes, because we thought instead of him doing review, which again does not give us time to ask and answer questions, why don't we try a little bit different?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? All right.
You did
Well done.
fine. You did fine.
You really,
Thank you.
just watching you, the teacher was coming out.
Oh, Gary, believe me, tonight I am not myself.
Do you get the idea in her university that any of her students misbehave?
No.
No.
I didn't have time.
She just brought me out a long time
No.
ago. I gotta tell you that.
Okay, let's look at Joshua. Turn to chapter 1, and let's read the first 4 verses.
So do we have a handout?
Oh, you haven't got the outline yet? Ooh, sorry.
Now you need it.
Sorry. Didn't know that. You hadn't gotten the handout.
Thanks for the notes tonight.
Yeah. Bottom line to learn tonight, if you bring your outline next week, you're in good shape.
Oh, no, I brought mine and didn't help me. Bella.
Bella,
Sit.
I'll
Good girl.
handle her in a
Thank you.
second. I want to handle everything. Thank you. Michael?
I need 2 trees.
Later.
We'll get you the second one later in a
Yes,
second.
I'll make a copy.
Oh,
Okay?
great, yeah, you're welcome.
All right.
All right. All right, let's read the first 4 verses of Joshua 1. Now it came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' servant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I'm giving to them, to the sons of Israel. Every place on which the sole of your foot treads, I have given it to you, just as I spoke to Moses. From the wilderness of this Lebanon, even as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and as far as the great sea towards the setting of the sun will be your territory. Okay? Now, turn back a page to the left, because we need to read about the death of Moses.
If someone needs pencils, I got a bunch of pencils here to make notes. If you need any.
So let's read through the first 10 verses of Deuteronomy 34. Now Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land, Gilead as far as Dan, and Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim, and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, and the Negev, and the plain in the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, and as far as Zoar. So in other words, well, let me go one more verse. Then the Lord said to him, this is the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not go over there. So he takes him to the top of Mount Nebo. He turns him to the north, to the east, to the south, and to the west. And he shows him the broad territory that included the mandate given in the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis 15. And he says, there it is. Sorry, pal, you're not going into it, but there it is. Okay?
Which gives you a clue how small the land is, because you can see all around.
You can. You can't see the entire territory, actually, because it went way far northeast, actually.
Right.
But he shows a very broad panorama of this area. And he reminds them of the breadth of this area. Verse 5. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab according to the word of the Lord. Now, here's what gets interesting. And he, who? God buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, but no man knows his burial place to this day. Now think about this for a moment. If you had a relative, and particularly if they were, let's say, famous, and they died, and then someone secretly buried them and told nobody where the grave was, how do you think that'd go over?
Not well.
Not well. So you go, what is God doing? He's not even letting the people honor Moses in his burial, is he?
Well, you might have worshipped Moses instead of God.
I'm sorry, say again?
They might have worshipped Moses instead of God.
Possibly. That is a possibility. But we find that there's another reason, and it's a very interesting one. But let's go on for a few more verses here. Notice verse 7, which is another interesting thing that we're told. And although Moses was 120 years old when he died, his eye was not dim, nor was his vigor abated.
So there was no reason for him to die.
Physiologically, he was fine. That's really what we're told. Physically, nothing wrong.
Maybe he was translated into heaven.
Well, but the point is, he had to die. But he had to die for a purpose. Because age was not his purpose, not his problem, was it? Okay. So, verse 8. So the sons of Moses wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. Then, after the days of weeping for mourning for Moses came to an end, of course, now 9, now Joshua the son of Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him, and the sons of Israel listened to him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. And then, of course, this tribute to Moses, verse 10, since then no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Okay? Now, turn to the opposite end of your Bible. Almost to the last book, which would be Revelation. But turn to Jude. So go all the way in the New Testament and go all the way to the end of it and go to the book of Jude. And we learn a very interesting and rather bizarre thing. Are you there? Mm-hmm. Okay. Verse 9. But Michael the archangel, when he disputed with the devil and argued about the body of Moses, did not dare pronounce against him a railing judgment, but said, the Lord rebuke you. Explain that one to me. Why was there an argument between Satan and Michael the archangel about the body of Moses?
You mentioned something about it already.
Now think about it. He had a weird death, right? He was buried secretly by God himself. He didn't die because he was debilitated by old age. He just like God took him to the top of Mount Nebo, showed him around and said,
Does it have something to
Boom.
do with Elijah?
okay, you're close. Now you're thinking about it. Okay.
Has something to do with Elijah? Is that what you said?
Now,
Witnesses that come back.
exactly. So, here's the key. When do we next see Moses? After this event, when do we next see Moses after his
Great
death?
tribulation.
Mount of Transfiguration.
Oh,
Mount of Transfiguration. During Jesus' day, Jesus goes up to the top of what we believe is Mount Hermon, which is a very interesting place. I won't go into that right now, because that would take us way off. But he goes there, and of course Peter is with him. Peter's there, okay? And he goes up to the top, and the disciples, the few of them are there with him. And who do they see with Jesus right there? Elijah and Moses. Translated, they now come back from the dead and are with Christ on the mount, and that we're told they're having a conversation. They're having a discussion. Okay? Now, when's the next time we see Moses?
In the tribulation.
Yes. Right, exactly. In Revelation chapter 11, we see that there are these two, I think it's 11, isn't it? I wrote it down here. 11, 4 through 6, we see that there are these two interesting characters. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands, which, by the way, remember that from Zechariah? Okay. All right. Before the Lord of the earth, and if anyone desires to harm them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. If anyone would desire to harm them in this manner, he must be killed. These have the power to shut up the sky in order rain may not fall during the days of their prophesying, and they have power over the waters to turn them into blood and to smite the earth with every plague as often as desire. So here are the two witnesses, and they make Antichrist's life miserable.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay? Because for 3.5 years, they defy him in every way. Okay? Uh-oh. So this is partly why we have this interesting death of Moses that occurs, because at the point at which he dies, quote unquote, at Mount Nebo, his life is not over.
Right.
He has a future. And these are the events that will occur that show his future. And he has a, go ahead, Anthony.
Does it indicate that Satan would like to destroy the bones of Moses?
I think
and Michael is...
I think what it indicates is that the reason why his body was buried in a secret place is because God did not want Satan to have access to his DNA, because God was going to bring him back into a mortal body, or not a transfigured body again. So he preserved him in an unknown place, and of course, obviously Satan had a great problem with this, because Satan is always trying to figure out a strategy to keep God from God's plan. And it's one more way in which he was trying to keep Moses from coming back. Okay? So very interesting death.
How did Satan know that Moses was going to come back?
I think I'm going to guess it may be because he knew there was something odd about how Moses died. I'm going to guess that made him suspicious that there's something going on here, and he was trying to figure it out.
Well, Elijah didn't die either.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Okay, now back to Yeshua.
Is there a possibility that he wasn't buried?
Well, he says he buried him in the text. His body was buried. He buried him in the valley in the land of Moab. So I think his body was buried. Okay?
And he used his body for the transfiguration. He used his own body.
I don't know if he used it then, but he's going to use it in the future. That's why there's a dispute. There was a dispute that's going to occur over it. Okay. Now, of course, we see here in these verses in Joshua that the Lord reiterates to Joshua the scope of the Abrahamic covenant. And basically, he tells Joshua, in essence, the 430 years are up. It's time. Okay? The time has come for the people to come into the land. Now, interestingly enough, there's a caveat to this, and that is in verse 3. Every place in which the sole of your foot treads, I have given to you, just as I spoke to Moses. What does that mean?
Well, wherever you walk the
Third verse
land,
of
uh,
Joshua 1.
Joshua could not have walked that whole territory.
Right. Himself.
But where he did walk, God said, hey, this belongs to you,
Yeah.
not the people that live here.
Okay. All right. But even further, it was promised that they'd have the land. It was promised to Abraham 430 years before they'd have the land. But there's a caveat here. Right? You have to do something.
Okay.
You have to do something. In other words, if they sat there in their holy little enclaves and said, give us the land, it wasn't going to happen. They had to go out. They had to walk through it. They had to have battles. They had to take the territory. And they had to take over the land because God said, I am your leader. I will lead you through this.
And I think even where they trod, they chisel in their feet so
Yeah.
that they could show
Well,
they had been there.
in the wilderness, that's true, yeah. It's Sinai. We see that. I believe that we've seen examples of that at Mount Sinai.
If you look, they found footprints as far as Mecca.
Oh, really? Okay, but still that's in the
So
Arabian
when you
Peninsula.
look at the Promised Land, it's actually bigger than modern day Israel.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, way.
Oh, yeah.
So what modern day Israel occupies is a very small portion of the promise.
Yes, that's
Right.
true.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to read you in the book of James, chapter 2. I want to show you the application of this principle of you must possess the land. I'm reading in James 2, and I'm going to start in verse 21. Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up Isaac his son on the altar? God didn't say that sacrifice, take Isaac there and I'll do it. He said to take Isaac there and Abraham was to do it, correct?
Right.
All right. Verse 22. You see that faith was working with his works. And as a result of the works, faith was perfected. And the scripture was fulfilled which says, and Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. And he was called the friend of God. This is the first verse in the Bible that explains that righteousness comes from faith. It's a very key verse. Genesis 15, verse 6. One very important to memorize. Verse 24. You see that a man is justified by works and not by faith alone. Look at his two examples now, verse 25. In the same way also was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works? So now we see James is citing the book of Joshua. Okay? When she received the messengers and sent them out by another way, we'll get to that very soon in the book of Joshua. For just as the body without faith, without the spirit is dead, so also faith without works is dead. So the point is that faith is made improved and matures through works. Works do not save, but faith must be followed by works. And that is, of course, the process of Christian maturity that we go through. We see the very principle started here in the book of Joshua. You must walk and do what I say.
His faith without works is dead.
Is dead. Exactly. It doesn't grow. It's not mature. Yes, Jeff?
Sounds like you're saved by faith, and your works are a result of being saved.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Now, let's go to verses 5 through 9. Let's read 5 through 9. Joshua 1. Joshua 1. He says, no man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I have been with Moses, I'll be with you. I will not fail you, nor will I forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall give this people possession of the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do all according to the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you may have success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Now let's go through that and break it down. God's commission to Joshua is exactly where they stood 40 years before, interestingly enough. If you look at the text, they're now at a place called Shittim. In Numbers 25:1, they were previously 40 years before in exactly the same place, except something happened in that place. Unfortunate. You remember what it was? Numbers 25? They decided that they were going to play a harlot, the daughters of Moab, and they started this huge orgy. Israel became it, and then they started to worship the gods of the Moabites, and God said, not going to happen. And so this was part of the reason why they kept wandering in the wilderness until that generation died out. Now they're back to square one. God brings them back to the same place, all right, and says, we're going to do it different this time. We're going to do it different this time. Now, God promises Joshua what no other general of troops has ever heard. Think about it. General Joshua, you will not be defeated in all that you're going to do. You will have success in everything you try. I guarantee it. You know, generals had that one before?
Sounds like that.
More than Patton. Okay? Greater than Patton. It's an unbelievable promise that he gives. So, we have one caveat, though, which is mentioned 3 different times. God says, but be strong and courageous. Be very strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. This is what Joshua and the people had to add to what God told them was going to happen. They had to show courage and strength in what they did. They had something to do. They needed to act on what God said that they needed to do.
But they were to meditate on his law day and night.
Yes, and we'll get to that in a second, okay? Now, in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, we see a very well-known set of verses that I want to read to you. Hebrews 11, verses 1 through 3. Now, think about these verses in relationship to what God has just said to Joshua and the people. Now, faith is the assurance of things hope for the conviction of things not seen. For by it the men of old gained approval. Isn't it interesting? They are our examples of faith. By faith we understand that the world was prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of the things which are visible. So we have here this very important statement, okay, that faith is the assurance of things not seen. They saw big cities with big walls and giant people, okay? And God said, don't look at that. I promised you, you're going to win. You are going to win. And that's what they had to focus on. Isn't it interesting also in Romans 14:23, again, you don't have to turn there, but I'll show you. I'm going to read it to you. There's this very interesting definition about sin. Romans 14:23, but he who doubts is condemned if he eats, because his eating is not from faith, and here's the definition, and whatever is not from faith is sin. Isn't it interesting how so many people like to define sin as being breaking the moral code of God? Well, that is one way that you can sin, but there's an even more important way in which you can sin, and that is not act in faith. Faith, though, means that you can't be 100% certain that what you begin to do is going to work out, because it's the assurance of something you haven't seen yet. Okay? You understand? It's the assurance. See, all the time we say, I want to do God's will. And you say, well, what are you going to do? And the person says, well, I'm not certain. I want to be assured that what I'm going to do is right.
Never be assured.
Faith is the assurance of things not seen.
Oh, when they crossed the Jordan, he told them to cross, but they had to step their foot in the water before he parted it.
Exactly. You must step out in faith. You cannot wait until you have the visible assurance. You must take the step in faith. Very important lesson for all of us to learn. Now, we also see another thing that Ann started to point out here back in Joshua chapter 1. And that is the emphasis here that's being made on the Word. Let me get back here, Joshua 1. Now, one thing that I've, of course, spent a lot of time doing because of seminary training is that when you read commentaries, you're constantly hearing this mantra from liberal theologians that say, the Bible was oral tradition over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years until finally man got to the point that he had the education ability to write it down. Okay? Except it is absolutely not true. Okay? In Exodus 17:4, going back to our verse that we talked about in the review, what's mentioned there? He says, and Moses wrote it down so that Joshua could see it. It was written down right after the Exodus. In Deuteronomy 31, do you want to look at these verses? Turn to Deuteronomy 31, because it's really close to where we are. Turn back to Deuteronomy 31. Starting at verse 9. So Moses wrote this law and gave it to the priests and the sons of Levi who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and to all the elders of Israel. And Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, at the end of the time of the remission of debts, which is called, okay, well, I think the remission of debts is actually the Day of Atonement. Okay, and the Feast of Booths then, if that those last 3 weeks, those feasts, okay, When all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God at the place which he shall choose, you shall read this law in front of all Israel in their hearing. So from Genesis 1:1 to the last verse of Deuteronomy 34, well, you couldn't quite go there yet because Moses hadn't died, okay? But let's say through at least 27 chapters or whatever of Deuteronomy, they all had to stand there to hear it all being read because it was all written down in scrolls already.
Why from Genesis 1:1?
Because it says they heard the whole law every 7 years. Every Jew had
Oh,
to
you
speak.
mean they heard about the time from Genesis?
They
Okay.
had it all read to them.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say, well, how did they know about the law? They didn't have their copy of the Bible. That's true. But every 7 years, they heard it all. From the first to the last. Okay?
And the children.
All the children, everyone heard it. They all had to be there and listen to it.
So when did the written word start?
In Exodus 17. The first time we have mention is when Moses said, God told Moses, write it down. Write it down. Okay? So the theory that we had hundreds and hundreds of years of oral tradition is absolutely wrong. It was written down from the very first time. It was written down into scrolls from the very beginning.
But did Moses just start writing with the Exodus? I mean, what did he
Well, he obviously was told, God told him about Genesis, okay? He was given a revelation.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
So you think that he read everything in Genesis?
By the time he died, it was all done.
And where did he get, and I'm going to be very basic, where did Moses get the paper to have for the scrolls and to write on?
Because they used sheepskin
They actually
way
used
before
the-
that. Oh, yeah, a long time before that. We have
What about goatskin? Same thing.
whatever, parchment. Parchment could be any animal skin. Paper had not been, the papyrus system was a little bit later. But we have many, many examples of many, many documents of this era that are written on parchment, rolled up. So it was available, lots of people did it, and that's where we get it. We could go look at also here in 31. Why don't you go to verse 19 of chapter 31 also. He says, now therefore write this song for yourselves and teach it to the sons of Israel. Put it in their lips in order that this song may be a witness for me against the sons of Israel. And what song is that? The whole thing is written out for you in the next chapter.
Yeah, the Song of
Song of
Moses.
Moses.
The Song of Moses in chapter 32. Every single Jew heard it, memorized it, and could sing it. And it summarized for them the work of God through history. It's a very interesting song. I wish we could take it apart right now, but I'll leave that for you to read it.
Moses also wrote a song.
He did. The 90th psalm, yes, is attributed to him. So, the point is that, well, one more thing. Turn over to Deuteronomy 32. Next one, in the Song of Moses, and go to the last 3 or 4 verses. Go to, start in verse 44 of Deuteronomy 32. Let me read. Then Moses came and spoke all the words of this song in the hearing of the people with Joshua the son of Nun. When Moses had finished speaking all these words to all Israel, he said to them, take to your heart all the words with which I'm warning you today, with which you shall command your sons to observe carefully, even all the words of this law. And verse 47 is very important. For it is not an idle word for you. Indeed, it is your life. The Word of God is our life. And by this word you shall prolong your days in the land which you are about to cross the Jordan to possess. So from the very beginning, the Word was written and the Word was revered. Now, notice also that he is instructed. Go back now to Joshua 1, and let me read. He says, verse 7, only be strong and very courageous, be careful to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Don't turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you may have success wherever you go. So why were they supposed to pay such attention to the Word?
Be successful.
Exactly. It didn't say, read it all and follow it to be righteous. It didn't say that. It said, do it so that you could be successful. In other words, it caused a change in you to encourage your success, not God's, yours.
Say it again.
It encourages the change in you so that you can have success. Okay? It's for our benefit that we do it, for our benefit.
But wasn't it also a testimony to the people around them?
It was. And let's go on to verse 8, because you mentioned this, Ann. Let's read 8 again, verse 8. The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. You shall meditate it on it day and night, so you may be careful to do all that's according that's written in it. For then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall have success. Again, it's all about causing a change and a pattern and ability in the people. So there are three things he's told here. He's told the law was to be discussed or shared. Right? Meditated.
In Russian, is here the end of verse 8. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. And in Russian, it's like, and then you will act wisely. You will be wise.
It's good way you put it. It causes wisdom, but you must read it to follow. So there's three things. The law is to be shared, talked about. It's read every 7 years. You are to ponder and consider and to meditate on it. Well, you can't do that unless you study it, right? So it must be something that's before you, that you read and consider so that you can meditate on. What does it mean? What is it saying to me? Okay, that's what we should ask as we meditate on the Word. And then he was to obey its commandments fully. And notice, you don't have to go here, but I'm going to go there. At the end of the book of Joshua, in chapter 23, here's what Joshua says. He says, be very firm then, to keep and do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, so that you may not turn aside from it to the right hand or to the left. So at the very end of his life, after the conquest has occurred, Joshua again says to the people, if you want to retain this land, if you want to have success here, if you want to have God's blessing here, follow the will of the Lord, written in the law. Don't let it depart from you. Now, another element here in these verses, back to Joshua 1, is he says, have I not verse 9, have I not commanded you, the third time, be strong and courageous, don't tremble, and don't be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. The presence of God was given especially, to begin with, was Joshua, to encourage him. Okay? Turn back, since we're close, back to Deuteronomy 31 again. Deuteronomy 31. And here's another promise. Verse 8. Deuteronomy 31:8. And the Lord is the one who goes ahead of you. He will be with you. He will not fail you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. So this is the promise that was made. You remember all the time Joshua spent with the Lord? He was there when the tablets of the law were given. He was there with the 70 elders. He was there at the tent of meeting. Joshua had a very great connection to Yahweh. He'd seen at least aspects of him. He'd been around the Shekinah glory many, many, many times. He knew who he was following. It's important. God was not some vague abstract to Joshua. He had many, many historical experiences with Yahweh. And he knew this is who he was following. And that,
He had a hunger.
he did. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And yet many Jews who also saw God's glory
Didn't follow.
and many miracles and everything,
They forgot. Okay, now, back to Joshua 1. Let's try to finish this up. Let's read verses 10 through 15. So now Joshua is addressing the people as God has addressed Joshua. All right? Then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, saying, prepare provisions for yourselves, for within 3 days you are to cross this Jordan, to go and possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you, to take it. And to the Reubenites, and to the Gadites, and to the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God gives you rest and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your cattle shall remain in the land which Moses gave beyond the Jordan, but you shall cross before your brothers in battle array all your valiant warriors and shall help them, until the Lord gives your brothers rest as he gives you, and they also possess the land which the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to your own land and possess that which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan towards the sunrise. Okay? Well, two things are mentioned here. He addresses, now the Lord is, Joshua's addressing the people. Of course, they were facing what seemed to be insurmountable odds as they were told about this land. And interestingly enough, it's almost like they're back again facing the Red Sea. Here's this Egyptian army behind them. They're an unarmed people, essentially. They come to the edge of the sea, and here's this ocean. What are we going to do? And God does a miracle. Well, you're going to see in the next couple of weeks, God's going to do a whole lot of miracles in relationship to Joshua. Things as miraculous as the parting of the Red Sea. Okay? Now, they are told to do something very interesting. He says, in 3 days we're going to march. So, gather up food. I think it's interesting because for 40 years nobody had gathered up food because they'd all been having manna. Now he says, hey, there's a transition occurring here. Now go to the land around and start to gather produce and pick things. Okay, slaughter animals, yada, yada, yada. Prepare for yourself because the manna is stopping and you're going to be back on a different system. Now, to understand the rest of what we read, we have to go to a historical text to read it. So turn, if you would, to Numbers 32, verses 1 through 8. Back to beyond Deuteronomy to Numbers 32.
One through eight.
Now we're going to go, okay, as soon as I get there. Okay, 32, 1 through 8. I'm having a little time finding it myself. Okay. Now, they have marched around in an area northeast of technical Israel. Okay? What today would be the northern part of the country of Jordan. Okay? And they're coming around that area, coming in from the north towards the Jordan River. I need to get some maps out to show you. So, starting in verse 1 of 32. Now the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad had an exceedingly large number of livestock. So when they saw the land of Jazer, this is where we're talking about, and the land of Gilead, and it was indeed a place suitable for livestock, the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuben came and spoke to Moses and to Eleazar the priest and to the leaders of the congregation, saying, and they talk about these guys, okay, the land which the Lord conquered before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock, for your servants have much livestock. And they said, if you have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your descendants, to your servants, as a possession, and do not take us across the Jordan. Verse 6. Moses said to the sons of Gad, to the sons of Reuben, shall your brothers go to war while you yourselves sit here? Like, yeah, this is nice land for you because you all have this land stock, but what the other guys? 9.5 other tribes. Okay? What's your obligation to them? Verse 7. Now why are you discouraging the sons of Israel from crossing over into the land which the Lord has given them? This is what your fathers did when I sent them to Kadesh Barnea to see the land. In other words, the 12 spies. That didn't work out so well. Okay? All right? Verse 9. For when they went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the sons of Israel, so they did not go into the land which the Lord their God had given them. Now, drop down, if you would, or drop over, to, as it were, to the next book, to Deuteronomy 3:12 through 20. Deuteronomy chapter 3. So go over a few pages to your right to Deuteronomy 3. And we're going to start in verse 12. So we took possession of this land at that time from Artar, which is by the valley of Arnon, and half the hill country of Gilead and its cities I gave to the Reubenites and to the Gadites, and the rest of Gilead, and all Bashan, that is the kingdom of Og, I gave to the half-tribe of Manasseh, and all the region of Argob, concerning all of Bashan, it is called the land of Raphaim. Jair, the son of Manasseh, took all the region of Argob as far as the border of the Gershurites and the Maccathites, and called it, that is Bashan, after his own name. And he goes on and talks about these names. And then he goes on and he says this. When Moses said to them, why should you have this land? Your brothers are going over to battle against all these peoples. They said to Moses, if you give us this land, our valiant men will go over with all the others and fight all the battles until we've taken the land, and then we'll go back home. So that's the agreement that's struck. And that's why 2.5 tribes of Israel are not in the technical land of Israel, because they're east of the Jordan River. That's how they got that area.
But they were in the land that God had promised.
In the broader sense. Yes, in the broader sense. So they made this oath, and here in the book of Joshua, okay, they're reminded of the oath they made. Okay? Joshua says, remember the agreement you struck with Moses? You must carry it out. And that's what we're talking about in these verses. Now, let's finish up in verses 16 through 18 of Joshua 1. And they all answered Joshua, saying, all that you have commanded to us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. just as we obeyed Moses in all things, we will obey you. Does that strike you as being a little tongue-in-cheek, maybe? How often did they obey Moses?
Right.
Not too much, okay? So hopefully they'll do better with Joshua than they did with Moses. But in their mind, they were somehow obedient. And he says, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Anyone who rebels against your command and does not obey your words and all that you have commanded him shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. Now, as we said, the tribes reaffirmed the vow and agreed to be, and it's interesting in verse 14, if you read the last half, it says, but you shall cross before your brothers in battle array. So literally, the Gad and the half tribe, as 2.5 tribes, actually agreed to become the forefront of the invasion troops going into the area. They're going to be the shock troops that are going to go in first. They agree to do that. So they promised to follow Joshua as they, quote, did Moses. But interestingly enough, they require in verse 17 something of Joshua. Do you see it? Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses.
Caveat.
The caveat. If you obey the Lord and we see you obeying the Lord, then we will follow you. That tells us a very interesting thing, again, about leadership. What happens if you have a leader who is not obeying the Lord? It's your job to decide whether he is.
The leader or not.
It's your job to decide if the leader is being obedient to the Lord. It's not his job to convince you. It's your job as a believer to say, is this in line with the Lord? An awful lot of cults and other things in the world would be stopped if people would just learn this. Follow, look at the leader and see if they're in line with what the Lord teaches and in the spirit of the Lord. If they are, follow them. If they aren't, oppose them.
But you're making a very interesting statement if I'm allowed to intervene here, because
Sure.
you're dealing with the most powerful in what we're dealing with here in this educational point. And the general public as a whole in the world today are not strong people.
That's right.
And therefore, I was reading back, and part of it were people inherit the earth, but the point being, your point's very well taken, but how, when you talk about cults or anything else, they're following cults because they haven't done their homework, they haven't done anything they should do, and they're weak in terms of their decisions.
And they're overly impressed by their cult leader. One of the dynamics of cults always is they have a charismatic leader who's good at talking, he's a wheeler dealer, he's very convincing, and therefore they follow him.
Yep.
It isn't for a spiritual reason. It's because of his personality. Cults are built around the personality of the leader.
Think of Jim Jones. He got them all to drink that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Perfect example.
You know, the point is, again, who is to judge about the appropriateness of the leader? Each believer. Okay? Each believer. You know, this is not, as Norm was well pointing out, this is poorly practiced in many churches. You know, the leader says we're supposed to do this. Okay. Well, is it right? Is it proper? Is he just trying to fluff his own feathers? Is he trying to gain his own agenda? Is he manipulating the situation? What is he doing? Those questions should be asked. So it's a good example of, you know, and Norm's absolutely right. You look at the world today, you do not see critical thinking going on. You see people being convinced through rhetoric or tradition or the voice of the leader, we should do this. They're not using critical thinking skills and thinking, now, is this really proper? Does this make sense? What's this going to lead to?
A good example in today's world is George Soros and his money,
Go ahead.
and how he pays people to have people follow his philosophy.
Absolutely.
That's a perfect example of what you're bringing forth today.
Yeah. I'll tell you another example.
You agree with my comment?
Yes, I did. I'll tell you another example. Now, I'm going to step into the doo-doo by probably saying this, but
It's not
I'll
gonna be
stop,
personal,
okay?
it'll last.
think about the mentality that's going on in the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
Think about it. Now, excuse me, but those morons think that they can alienate 65% of the population of the people that watch them every Sunday and think that things will go well.
Well, the worst problem you got is Roger Goodell.
And you do.
I mean, literally, because he's the leader. Okay, you have this right. No, you don't. The people who are standing there having the opportunity to make millions of dollars and play football, there's been one whale of a lot of bloodshed for them having the right
Absolutely.
to live in this country.
Absolutely.
And not serve in the military, and not serve in the government, and not do anything for their part, but sit there and mock the pride of the
Absolutely.
country. And the people that are dying in Iraq or Afghanistan or any place else in the world.
Yeah. I have an idea about what should be done. This is the Kennedy Doctrine about NFL, okay? If you are so concerned, Roger Goodell, about the First Amendment rights of your players, then you should allow every person that buys a ticket to your games, every cult, every political faction to come in with their banners and have their First Amendment rights in all the stands all around you. You see? And therefore, everyone would be so disgusted that no one would watch it anymore.
You're dealing with Charlottesville
Yeah.
all over again.
Yeah.
That's what you're inviting.
So that's what I think we should do. Invite everyone in to express their First Amendment rights and every pet peeve they have. The Kennedy Doctrine. All right.
If you don't have the military there, you will have
Yeah.
a severe problem. You think Jones was a problem? That could be a real problem.
Yeah. Okay. I'm done. It's getting late. And now we come to an important point. Gary, lead us.
We are going to do communion